Predator Badlands raised a lot of questions from the very beginning just by existing. Arguments about whether making the series antagonist the main character is a good idea haven't died down yet, and will surely continue. I have already watched the movie, so in the next few minutes we will talk about it without spoiling the plot. Meanwhile, you can write in the comments what you think about the new part if you have already seen it. Yes, and at the end of the video we will discuss some plot questions and the Predator connection to the movie Stranger Things, as ridiculous as that might sound. Let's start with the fact that Badlands entered the top 3 highest-rated films of the franchise, which is already quite an achievement. However, it is worth clarifying that this is according to critics, of course. On the Rotten Tomatoes site, only Prey and the Killer of Killers anthology are ranked higher. It is interesting that all 3 projects were created by Dan Trachtenberg, or were created with his active participation. Things aren't so clear-cut here if you look into it, because Prey, for example, didn't become a favorite of franchise fans, dividing them into 2 camps. Therefore, calling the film successful right now is still too early. Regarding Badlands, initially, the ratings from ordinary viewers are exclusively positive, but these are just the first reviews after literally a few days. Time will tell how much the new Predator can hold the audience's interest over the long haul, and how the fan community will accept it. So far, the picture is performing at the level of Ballerina, which with a budget of $100 million is tolerable, but one shouldn't expect records. It should be noted that while previously Predator tried to be a gritty action movie with an adult age rating, the new part received a teen rating like most Hollywood blockbusters. This means that one shouldn't expect any abundance of blood dismemberment and torn out spines from the very beginning. However, there is a nuance here that explains why there isn't a single human character in the film. By the way, the director himself spoke about this in a recent interview. The creators of the Predator and Alien movies continue to experiment with plots expanding the universe. Predator Badlands made the Predator the main character for the first time, and Alien Earth moved the xenomorph to our planet. The fact is that a teen rating is important for any film because it objectively expands distribution opportunities and consequently box office receipts. But Predator is a film about a hunter who takes the skulls of killed opponents as trophies. However, restrictions on showing blood and torn off limbs apply to humans, whereas there are none in the film. It was clear even from the trailer that on the remote planet there are only synthetics, the Yautja himself, and local flora and fauna. Therefore, you don't need to worry that the new part turned out childish. In this regard, the picture is doing fine. As for the film itself, journalists really didn't exaggerate. The director ended up with a futuristic action movie with a large amount of action, a couple of funny moments, and an uncomplicated plot. It is unlikely that the film can compete for the title of the most successful blockbuster, but it generally copes with its task. Even from the trailers, it was clear that a completely different Predator awaits us. This is not the deadly Yautja with whom we are used to associating the franchise. When the main threat of all films suddenly becomes the central hero, it is either a complete success or a failure. Such a decision will definitely divide the fans. Although many boycotted the film even before its release because they didn't appreciate the director's approach. Now one can empathize with the main character. One can understand his desire to kill the apex predator and at the same time take revenge. Because of this, the perception of the Yautja becomes completely different. Of course, they reveal the clan structure a little show. The value or conversely indifference to the concept of family, casually demonstrate new weaponry, a deadly planet, and drop hints at a crossover. But this is a different movie against the backdrop of which even Prey now seems like an excellent representative of the franchise. The Predator is now an outcast who embarks on a journey to prove that he is worthy of his clan, getting to know a Weyland-Yutani android and other creatures along the way. The outcome of the film can be predicted by minute 20, although this doesn't interfere with viewing, because in general terms it was understandable even from the trailers. The main plot intrigue consisted of whether the apex predator is truly the monster shown in the trailer, or if we are being misled and in reality it was about a xenomorph. We won't reveal the plot here, but we will just say that the presence of Weyland-Yutani on the planet is felt quite strongly. By the way, the crossover looming in the foreseeable future also explains why Badlands makes the Yautja the main character. After all, if aliens are ideal killers who survive in any conditions and do not possess developed social traits, then predators are quite the opposite. Therefore, in the event of a confrontation, the viewer must empathize and understand, and the Yautja is much more suitable for this role. The director must be given credit for the fact that the film did not turn into a totally typical blockbuster. There is humor here, but this is not the Predator from 2018 when they tried to carry the whole picture on it. The funny moments turned out appropriate, organically fitted into the story, and without awkward jokes. The action turned out normal by the standards of the genre, but it is difficult to call it inventive or memorable. In the moment it looks great, but leaving the cinema it is unlikely that something will sink into the soul so much that you will want to rewatch it. Computer graphics, by the way, also look confident, and low-quality moments were not noticed. The planet is drawn interestingly, the locations shown are diverse, as is the number of local predators who are not averse to feasting on each other. The acting, by the way, also doesn't raise any special questions. Elle Fanning really carries every scene and generally feels wonderful in this role. Let us remind you that she plays two characters at once who turned out absolutely different. This is the merit not only of the makeup artists but also of the actress whom critics praised for a reason. The Yautja himself really turned out too humanized. You no longer feel awe before him as before other representatives of his race. This is still an inexperienced youngster who can show emotions and even joke. How good or conversely bad this is difficult to assess unequivocally. In some scenes it looks organic, but if you look at the history of the franchise as a whole, then it is rather unusual. In any case, everyone here will decide for themselves how close the director's vision is to them. Separately, I want to mention the Yautja language, which we don't hear often in films. They didn't translate it into English or dub it, but decided to limit themselves to subtitles. Because if Dex spoke freely, this would have finally broken the perception of the predators. Now, if suddenly a viewer accidentally ended up at a screening and hadn't seen or heard anything before, then most likely they will like Badlands. It is a spirited action movie with an unusual main character and colorful companions. However, for fans of the franchise, the new part won't feel like such, because the film seems to aim to conquer a new audience. We are offered a fresh look revealing the inner workings of the predators, but at the same time radically changing the canonical image of the character. Interestingly, the initial idea of the film was supported by James Cameron, saying that such a bold move could work. In essence, he pulled off something similar himself in the 80s when he made the main villain from the first Terminator the main hero of the sequel. And this really flipped the perception of the film and gave us a cult character. Cameron, by the way, managed to praise the final version of Badlands, noting that Trachtenberg coped with the assigned task. But whether such a role change will work with the Predator remains honestly debatable for now. At the moment, the future of the franchise remains suspended. Apparently, even the studio isn't sure how successful this experiment will turn out. Despite the obvious hint at a continuation in the last scene, the studio decided to take a pause to assess how much the viewers will like Trachtenberg's vision. There have been no official announcements about the next parts yet, and everything will depend on the final box office of the tape. In any case, we advise watching Badlands to form your own opinion on whether you like such an image of the Yautja or if the studio still went down the wrong path. And now a few words for those who have already watched the film and are not afraid of spoilers. Let's start, of course, with the question about xenomorphs. Despite Trachtenberg's statement that one shouldn't expect a crossover, hope remained anyway. The plot, which essentially laid out the film from beginning to end, seemed too obvious. Hints and connections with the alien universe aroused more interest than a simple story about revenge, friendship, and finding oneself. But as they say, we got what we got. There was a hint at a continuation, but it is connected with the appearance of the main character's mother. Deck's clan, which now consists of Tia and a teenage Kalisk, challenges the established traditions of the Yautja. He becomes a target not only for his mother, who might become the opponent in the sequel, but also for the entire race. And then there is Wayland Yutani, which also didn't get the desired specimen because of Deck, but which Deck still has. Therefore, Badlands prepared the ground for a sequel which can become either another road movie or clash the Yautja with the forces of Earth more globally. The director himself notes that he has ambitions to expand the franchise further. Moreover, both with existing heroes and with completely new ones. For example, he initially planned a direct sequel to Prey with Naru, but the studio insisted on changing the setting, so we will probably return to her sometime. A curious moment is connected with the reference to Stranger Things. The fact is that Dan Trachtenberg was supposed to take part in the filming of the 5th season and become the director of the 3rd episode. However, the production of both projects took place in parallel, and they failed to coordinate schedules in the end. At the same time, Trachtenberg didn't miss the opportunity to work with the Duffer Brothers and persuaded them to voice a few lines in the Yautja language. As a result, their voices made it into the final cut, and we hear them in the voice commands of Deck's ship. It turned out to be such a subtle reference. That is how ambiguous Predator Badlands turned out. And surely disputes about its innovative ideas will haunt fans for a long time. In the meantime, be sure to share your impressions of the film. And isn't it time for the studio to attract other directors to the franchise? That is all for today, friends. See you in new videos very soon.